Welcome to the WIHS Journal. On today's broadcast, we'll be talking to Mary Bruce. She has written the book, Widowhood, A Calling to Leadership, A Changed Perspective on Loss. Today, Mary will share information about her book and about being a widow. I've known you for so many years, you being a pastor at the House of Prayer in Waterbury, but now I know you have a new calling. You moved out of Connecticut, but thank you so much for writing this book, and I know that God has departed so much into your spirit to know about this. So maybe talk to our listeners and just tell us, a quick testimony of how a widowhood happened for you.
Well, thank you for this opportunity, Anissa, and I will share that for me it was pretty quick. A quick situation. My husband contracted a cancer that he was only sick for 6 weeks before he went home to be with the Lord, and it happened to be the weekend before 9/11, and his memorial service was the day before 9/11. So that whole week became a week of intense memories for many years.
Yeah.
But he was a real he had been a military man, and I saw that his military mindset really helped me push through and was a little contagious.
Yeah.
So that I too felt like, okay, this is the calling and this is what has to happen and this is how we're going to go.
Amen. Thank you so much for sharing that. You have such a sweet, tender spirit. So tell us, how come you wrote this book?
I saw the difficulty of ministry leaders, honestly, especially as I became a pastor. I heard many ministry leaders and pastors complaining about their need for leaders. And then I knew the giftings that many widows have, that they have leadership skills that could be beneficial to congregations. And I also sensed the difficulty people had with trying to help widows.
Who primarily would you say that you did write the book for?
I started writing it for widows, but in reality, as I came upon putting it all down, I saw more that I wanted it to be for anyone. For widows, because they have an opportunity. First of all, they're thrust into leadership as soon as they become a widow.
Yeah.
They become the leader of their families, their homes, sometimes their husbands' businesses. Yet, even in churches, widows are often approached as victims of trauma, even years after their loss. So I felt like this was really for widows. That's how I began writing it. But then I also, as I said, I knew the difficulty and the many absences, the many times that church leaders are wearing 6 or 7 different hats because there isn't active leadership being brought up or being mentored in the church. And I could see that. So It's really for both widows and church leaders.
So in writing this book, it's called Widowhood, A Call to Leadership. Do you think that kind of your grief reacted, or it was something of a healing process?
Writing the book was the result of journaling, of years of journaling, because I really do journal. I try to journal daily, and I feel like a lot of times we can express ourselves in our journals, and then, like David, we lay out all of our ifs, ands, and buts, but then we wait on the Lord and receive His messages to us. So writing of the book really came about as I was going day by day and through my life experiences coming through 18, 19 years of widowhood now.
Yeah. So, in your years, you said 18, 19 years of widowhood. What do you think that your relationship with God, how has it strengthened you?
Oh, it's been wonderful because I've had to be intimate with the Lord. And there are lonely times and alone times and difficult times, the unknown, all of the unknowns that we go through when you are used to being able to share it with a life mate, and then you no longer have that life mate on this side of heaven to share it with. That has grown my faith tremendously. I remember when the first time I had to leave home, I was going to be leaving my house at 3:30 in the morning to get to the airport to fly out to Colorado. And I called my sisters, and they and their husbands came together, and we had dinner. And I said, who do I call home to? Do I call home to the answer machine and say, hello, Mary, you made it? It was like a joke. But they agreed, oh, no, you could. One of them agreed, you can call me. I'm at work. I'll be just getting off work at that time. So I called her from the line at the airport and said, I'm in line getting onto the plane now. The plane went to the end of the runway, and they said, ladies and gentlemen, we're sorry, we're going to have to go and defreeze, de-ice.
Wow.
So everybody was like, okay, so now we go back out to the end of the runway again, and they repeat the same message. And now you can hear everybody checking their schedules, and people are starting to murmur. And so when I was going from Bradley to Dallas and then Dallas to Colorado Springs. When I got to Dallas, I got off that plane, and I started running as fast as my little feet could take me all the way around, of course, to the other side of the airport. And I get over there, and there's no plane. And I say, where's my plane? And they say, we heard that a plane was coming in from Connecticut that was late. So they moved the departing plane right next to where the Connecticut plane came in. So I ran all the way back and couldn't find it. It was the plane was still there, but they would not open the door and let me on the plane. And I received a gift to go sit and have lunch. While I was having lunch, I looked out on the breezeway where people were walking by. I was stuck in my little chair where I was with the package and the food and everything. But I see this man walking by, and it looks like an uncle that I have not seen for 10, 20 years. Can't be. So I call my mother, and I tell her. She says, well, let me check. She calls her sister-in-law, and sure enough, it was my uncle. When my mother called me back and said, that's Don. He's going from there through Dallas, from California through Dallas to Indiana.
Wow.
I'm going from Connecticut through Dallas to Colorado. There I see him. But as my mother was speaking to me, I heard the Lord saying, Mary, you go where I tell you to go. I could put your family there if you needed them.
Wow.
And that became, that was my first adventure with Christ. And I really did see him as an adventurous. I do see him as an adventurous God. He provides for us. He directs us if we ask. If we want to, he's willing. And so that's what I hope to impart with others, to other widows, that God and Jesus is willing to be our guide. He's willing to be our comforter and our intimacy. You know that word intimacy, our pastor says, that's into me see. Well, that's not just God seeing into me, but it's me seeing into God, into a different perspective of who God is. So Amen. I pray that our listeners, those who are widows and those who want to help widows, those who are widowers. Someone asked me recently, can I give this to my father-in-law? Do you think it would be good for him? I think it's for everybody who's in the church to read. Because if you're not dealing with, there's something in there that will minister to the heart of everyone, I believe.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing your heart, being a widow now for almost 18 years. Can you just tell our listeners where they can find out more information about you or even get the book? Yes. They can get the book they can get the book best by contacting me. And you can contact me at widowhoodbook.org or at Mary R, as in Robert, Bruce at hotmail.com. Okay. Any closing thoughts you would like to convey to our listeners before we close the broadcast? Yes, I just want to encourage people that it's just a short read, but it has value. I think that there's a high probability that every person listening either knows several widows or has a friend or a relative who's a widow or has a heart for widows. So I do believe that this is something that can benefit many people. Once again, that was Mary Bruce and her book, Widowhood, A Calling to Leadership, A Changed Perspective on Loss. Letting you know that Mary has graciously donated a few copies of this book for our listeners. You can email us at WIHS@snet.net. That's WIHS@snet.net. The opinions expressed are those of the participants, not necessarily those of a staff or management of a station. I'm Anissa Porticelli for News and Public Affairs.